Good day, Mom. Today I'm going to discuss the institutional correction, the 5 facts about the Philippine incarceration system, person antiquity to modernity, and religion's role in prison. What is institutional? Institutional is a public use such as church, prison, public or private school, hospital, or publicly owned operated buildings. What is correction? Correction is a branch of the criminal justice system concerned with the custody, supervision, of rehabilitation of criminal offenders. What is the main purpose of institutional correction? Correction focuses on rehabilitation and regards inmates as patients who need treatment and guidance. Institutional correction, rehabilitation of offenders in jail or prison. Community-based correction. It is correctional activities that takes place in the community that directly address to the offender and aim at helping him or her to become a law-abiding citizen. Why is that there's institutional correction and non-institutional correction? It is because to avoid overcrowding inside in a prison. Difference between jail and prison. Jail are intended for short sentences and temporary confinement. Prison, a penitentiary and institution for the imprisonment, incarceration of persons convicted of major serious crimes. In the year 2018, the Philippines held 6th highest prison population of 21 Asia's countries. As of 2019, the Philippines population rested at 108.31 million people and 215,000 of those people were incarcerated. Therefore, the Philippines has an incarceration rate of about 200 per 100,000 citizens. Unfortunately, they are mismanaged and overcrowded. So what will happen if it's overcrowding? Overcrowding as well as related problems such as lack of privacy, mental health problems, increased rates of violence, self-harm, and suicide. 5 important facts about the incarceration system in the Philippines. Number 1, severe overcrowding. The number of prisoners exceed the official prison capacity over 100% occupancy rate. In the year of 2016, Rodrigo Duterte won the presidential election. He promised to end crime within 6 months. This promise also include the killings of 10,000s of criminals. Rodrigo Rua Duterte, also known as Digong, is a Filipino politician who is the 16th incumbent president of the Philippines. He also the chairperson of PDP Laban, the ruling political party in the Philippines. Duterte's election led to the infamous war on drugs and eventually overcrowded prisons. Currently, these dorm houses around 500 people. Similarly, a room designed for 30 people holds about 130 in the Quezon City jail. Prison overcrowding leads to increased violence, increased prevalence of communicable and chronic disease, self-harm, mental illness, and suicide. Number 2, pre-trial detainees. Remand or preventative detention. It is when someone is detained by the state while they are waiting for trial to determine whether they are innocent or guilty. According to the World Prison Brief, 75.1% of incarcerations within the Philippines incarceration system are pre-trial. In 2018, 1,421, 42 of 1,808 and 278 prisoners were trial detainees. What is World Prison Brief or WPB? The World Prison Brief is an online database providing free access to information on prison systems around the world. It is a unique resource which supports evidence-based development of prison policy and practice globally. Unfortunately, many people are serving sentence without conviction. Pre-trial detention is found in judicial system all over the world. In countries like the Philippines, people may serve time that outweighs their crimes. On average, prisoners in the Philippines are detained for 9 months without being sentenced. Number 3, high death tolls. The number of deaths resulting from a particular cause, especially an accident, battle, or natural disaster. About 5,200 inmates die annually at the New Bilibid Prison, or NBP. The hospital medical chief, these deaths are due to overcrowding, dirty living conditions, and inmate violence. The New Bilibid Prison in Muntinlupa, Metro Manila is the main insular penitentiary designed to house the prison population of the Philippines. It is maintained by the Bureau of Correction under the Department of Justice. At the 2019 Philippine Senate hearing, Tamayo said that there were uncontrollably outbreak of pulmonary tuberculosis. Tamayo reports that at least one prisoner dies at NBP each day. Politicians and prison employees are working to reduce overcrowded in the Philippines prisons. Human rights advocates have also called for the release of vulnerable inmates, hoping to protect them from poor living conditions. Human rights advocate. The Monitor report on an attempt to redress violations of the civil, social, and cultural political rights basic to humankind. Number 4. Vigilant justice. Vigilant justice often describes the actions of a single person or group of people who claim to enforce the law but lack the legal authority to do so. Philippine Drug War. The Philippine Drug War is the anti-drug policy and actions of the Philippines government under President Rodrigo Duterte, who assumed office on June 30, 2016. Duterte's war on drugs escalated during his presidency. Jobless citizens were recruited to kill anyone suspected of dealing, buying, or using drugs. 5. Corruption. Corruption is a form of dishonesty or criminal offense which is undertaken by a person or organization which is entrusted with position of authority in order to acquire illicit benefits or abuse power for one's personal gain. In August 2018, the public learned a former mayor may have been released from prison for good behavior. He was originally charged from rape and homicide in 1993. Antonio Sanchez was a Filipino politician who served as a mayor of Calwan, Laguna from 1980 to 1986 and from 1988 to 1993. He is the convicted mastermind in the murders of Ellen Sarmenta and Alan Gomez, both students of the University of the Philippines. Manila, Philippines. Relief followed days of anguish for the mother of Mary Ellen Sarmenta after the Bureau of Corrections, Bucor, declared that her daughter's killer Antonio Sanchez will not be released from prison after all. Clara Sarmenta lauded the Bucor for re-evaluating the case of Sanchez and ruling out his release under the Good Conduct Time Allowance or GCTL Law or Republic Act of 10592. Republic Act 10592, the Good Conduct Time Allowance or GCTA law, allows for reduction of sentences or persons deprived of liberty, depending on how well they abide by rules and regulations inside any penal institution, rehabilitation or detention center or any other local jail. Sarmiento yesterday told the Star how she was hoping and praying hard that Sanchez would no longer see freedom, for he deserved to rot in jail. The Bureau of Corrections says Antonio Sanchez was declared dead on arrival at the Bilibid Hospital on March 27, 2021, 11:29 a.m. He had chronic kidney disease, hypertension, and prostate problems. Similar stories of corruption in the Philippines prisons continued to emerge. In September 2018, the public learned that a woman was told her husband's sentence would be shortened if she paid 50,000 pesos or $970. Later that year, senators stated that inmates could live like kings for a fee. This information led to further allegations prison workers and officials were taking bribes to bring and distribute contraband to inmates. Inmates who cannot afford a better life within the prison are stuck in overcrowded and dirty rooms. These inmates have a higher rate of becoming ill and dead. During these times, prisons were almost always stationed in the underground dungeons where guilty or suspected criminals spent their life either awaiting death sentence or a command to become slaves, often working as a galley slaves. Dungeon is a room or cell which prisoners are held, especially underground. Exception from the rules come from the home of modern democracy. Greece, their prisoners were held in the poorly isolated buildings where they could often be visited by their friends and family. Primary source of their detention were not dungeons, high walls or bars, but simply wooden blocks that were attached to their feet. Ancient Roman Empire, however, continued to use harsher methods. Their prisons were built almost exclusively underground with tight and claustrophobic passageway and cells. Prisoners themselves were held either in a simple cells or chained to the walls for life or for time. As slavery was accepted norm in those days, majority of prisoners that were not sentenced to death were sold as slaves or used by the Roman government as a workforce. Gladiators, unarmed combat who in turn audience in the Roman Republic and Roman Empire in violent confrontations with other gladiators with wild animals and condemned criminals. The most famous gladiator battleground, the mighty Colosseum Arena in Rome, had a slave army of 224 slaves that worked daily as a power source of complicated network of 24 elevators that transported gladiators and their wild animal opponents from the underground dungeons to the arena floor. The conditions in the European prisons remain harsh until English royalty started being more involved with their justice system. One of the most historic prison legislation was introduced in 1215 when King John signed Magna Carta, which started that no man could be imprisoned without trial. Henry II commissioned the construction of first prison in the 1166 together with the first draft of English legal system that used concept of jury. One of the most historic prison legislation was introduced in 1215 when King John signed Magna Carta, which stated that no man could be imprisoned without trial. Magna Carta. Magna Carta was issued in June 1215 and was the first document to put into writing the principle that the king and his government was not above the law. Each prisons become overcrowded and new penal measures started being implemented: military pardon and penal transportation. Penal colonies. Exile colony is a settlement used to exile prisoners and separate them from general population by placing them in a remote location, often island or distant colonial territory. France even continued their practice of penal colonies until the middle of 20th century. French Guiana and its infamous prisons, Devils Islands, and Russia also used remote penal colonies in the frozen north-east Siberia. Devil's Island Prison. The penal colony of Cagny, commonly known as Devil's Island, was a French penal colony that operated for more than 100 years, from 1852 to 1953, in the Salvation Islands of French Guiana. The age of modern prisons that we know today started with the several prison reforms in 19th century in England. Solitary confinement. The state of being kept alone in prison cell away from other prisoners. Wars that engulfed the world in the beginning of 20th century brought the information of large amounts of war prison camps and concentration camps. Nazi government formed over 300 detention centers in which political opponents, Jews, gypsies, criminals, and others were detained without judicial process. Majority of them was eventually killed on an unprecedented massive scale that is today estimated to be between 11 and 17 million people. 20th century modern prison system was finalized. Concept of probation service was introduced in 1991, and 3 years before that, first prison intended solely for the holding of inmates in permanent isolation was formed. Probation service, a statutory criminal justice service that supervises high-risk offenders released into the community. How does probation works in the Philippines? Probation may be granted whether the sentence imposes a term of imprisonment or a fine only. An application for probation shall be filed with the trial court with notice to the appeal court if an appeal has been taken from the sentence of conviction. Those supermax prisons become widespread across in the entire United States, with over 40 of them being active in the year 2005. Supermax prison. A super maximum security or administrative maximum prison is a control unit prison or a unit within prisons, which represent the most secure level of custody in the prison system of certain countries. As of 2006, it is estimated that over 9 million people are in prison worldwide, with United States leading in the rate of incarceration 743 per 100,000 people. Different types of prisons and thickety time. Religion's role in prison. Religion's value in prison is often about its contribution to the individual growth or development of a particular inmate. This focus is to perceive role of religion in helping lower the chances of recidivism among inmates. Volunteers in prison. Volunteers also have a long story in corrections that can be traced back to the beginning of prisons. In the last 200 years, many religious people have entered correctional facilities to provide religious service to inmates.